Hey, listen!
Welcome everyone, this is Andre's Restart, and this time we are talking about Metroid Prime 4. This game has been in development throughout the entire lifetime of the Nintendo Switch. It's been a long time, we've been waiting, there's anticipation. I think this game is going to be a special game from Nintendo, potentially one of the greatest games they've ever made. I have that much anticipation for this game. And I think there's a chance it could be unveiled really soon. We may finally get to see how this game's going to look, and that may also mean it's not so far off from release either. So with the talk and expectation of a Nintendo Direct coming this September, could it be that Metroid Prime 4 will finally be shown off? Well, that's what we're talking about today. But before we go further, I'm going to point out that we are aiming to hit 50,000 subscribers by the end of the year. So if you do enjoy my content, please subscribe and hit the notification bell. With your help, it can happen. And another little note I'll put out here, I'm entering vacation mode, so the videos coming out in this week and next week may have a more simplified editing format, but I'll still be having videos like this one come out over the next couple weeks to keep the conversation going, because there is a lot to talk about. So thinking about this Metroid Prime 4 situation, I think there's a few different ways it can go. And a lot of this does come down to what Nintendo is planning for Metroid Prime 4. Andy Robinson from Video Games Chronicle has said he's heard that Metroid Prime 4 is supposed to be the last big Switch game. If Prime 4 is the last big Switch game, what does that mean exactly? Does that mean that it'll be the very last game to come out on Switch? Or does it mean it'll be the last big title that will be exclusive to Switch before Nintendo moves on to a next-gen system? Or does it simply mean it's the last big title that will come out on Switch, but will still somehow be available for Switch 2 as well? Those are all possibilities. But ultimately, what I think this means is that Metroid Prime 4 will come out at some point next year. That is the belief. And I say that because there are reports from multiple places that Switch 2 is coming out in the second half of 2024. And I know there are some people who will debate if this will be happening or not, and maybe it won't be happening. But when you consider by this point next year, the Switch will be more than 7 years old, and by the end of 2024 will be more than 7.5 years old, and historically speaking, Nintendo's never had a system go that long without having a new system prepared to come out. And when you also factor in that, yes, sales have been good, in terms of hardware sales, they are still trending downwards, and they are forecasting the third drop in a row. None of these things suggest that we are years away before the next system. They all suggest that Nintendo is preparing for their next system and it should be coming out soon. So the reports are very believable, is my point here. Not to mention we've heard about dev kits from a few different places out already, which does put the timing around the second half of next year. So if this is going to happen, and Prime 4 is going to be the last big Switch game, regardless of how you interpret that, it's most likely going to come out at some point next year, either a few months before the Switch 2 comes out, or maybe a few months after the Switch 2 comes out. Lately, I've been liking the idea that, let's say Switch 2 comes out maybe September next year alongside 3D Mario, or October, and then a month or 6 weeks afterwards, Prime 4 comes out as another big release, but it's a dual release. So it comes out on Switch, but also Switch 2, kind of like Breath of the Wild, except 3D Mario will be the first title that comes out on Switch 2, but they still give Prime 4 this big focus. It still has this big emphasis. People can enjoy it on either system, but the Switch 2 will run the game a little bit better. It will have a better resolution, and it could be a big deal for that game going into the holiday of 2024. Point is though, if this game is coming out sometime next year, Nintendo does need to unveil it. And this September Nintendo Direct, I think, could be the time. I'm not saying for sure. I think there's a chance it could happen sometime early next year as well, especially if they're trying to pivot this as a big Switch 2 game. Maybe they'll be saving a reveal of Prime 4 alongside the new system to really hype it up. But Prime 4 is supposed to be a Switch game. It's still listed as a Switch game. It was announced as a Switch game. Switch owners have been waiting for this game the entire time. So I do think Nintendo needs to make good on that promise, not to mention with the amount of people who own a Switch. I think last I checked it's approaching 130 million systems sold worldwide. Nintendo would be foolish to give up on that entire audience for Prime 4 when they're trying to push this series to reach greater sales levels. So I totally think it's coming to Switch. So because of that, I don't think they have to save Prime 4 for a Switch 2 unveil reveal event. I think they can actually show off Prime 4 beforehand, even if they are planning Prime 4 to be a big game to come out alongside Switch 2 as some sort of dual release. And this Nintendo Direct might be the perfect time to do so. So I was actually taking a look at the last few September Nintendo Directs, and there's something that I noticed. Nintendo seems to use the September Directs to always sort of start to build up the lineup for next year. And what I've noticed is they tend to give us updates or reveals of 4 big games for the next year. And by big games, I mean Nintendo published titles. So going back to the September Direct of 2021, this will be building up the year for 2022, they finally unveiled Bayonetta 3, a game that we were waiting news for throughout the entire Switch lifecycle, like Prime 4. They announced Kirby's Forgotten Land, which came out early the next year. They gave us a big update trailer on Splatoon 3, and more details on Triangle Strategy. 4 big games for 2022. And then, in the September Nintendo Direct of 2022, which is used to give us details on 2023, they announced Kirby's Return to Dreamland Deluxe, they announced Fire Emblem Engage, they announced Pikmin 4, and they gave us a title and release date for The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. So going into this September Nintendo Direct, I'm not expecting Nintendo to announce Switch 2. I personally think we won't see that announced until sometime next year, even though there are rumors suggesting it could happen sometime this year. We shall see, but if it's a second half of 2024 thing, I'm kind of skeptical. But this Direct I do expect to give us an update on 4 big Nintendo games for 2024. And at this point, all we know about in terms of games that are coming out next year is the Untitled Peach game and the Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon visual enhancement. If we're going to get 4 big updates on 4 Nintendo games for next year, I guess you could say that the Peach game and the Luigi game could take up 2 of those 4 announcements. I am betting that there will be one more announcement of a game that we don't know about that is coming out early next year, so they can fill up that beginning of the year lineup. But I also think they're going to showcase a game that's going to be a big release for next year, and Metroid Prime 4 could be it. If it's the last big Switch game, this might just be the time for Metroid Prime 4. Now, the scenario I see where Prime 4 isn't showcased in the Direct is if Nintendo decides to show something else off instead that's going to be a big Switch game. And I think maybe it could be Donkey Kong, because Donkey Kong also, I think, has a great chance of being showcased or coming out at some point next year, given that the Donkey Kong expansion to Super Nintendo World is supposed to open next year as well, and I feel that there needs to be a Donkey Kong game that should coincide with that. Maybe not day and date, but there should be some semblance of proximity in terms of release, so there can be decent cross-promotion. Same with how we're having Mario games come out now, even though the Mario Bros. Movie came out earlier this year. It doesn't have to be like extremely close, but relatively close. So the Donkey Kong game could finally be shown off in this Direct instead of Metroid Prime 4. But also, the Donkey Kong game could be saved for Switch 2. Nintendo has not officially publicly announced this title yet, so it could be a Switch 2 title, and they don't have to make good on any promises because there was never any promise that it would be coming specifically for Switch. Technically, we don't even know if there is a Donkey Kong game in development, technically. But I totally believe there is for a number of reasons. Anyways, Prime 4 has a really good chance. I would say there's like a 50% chance, if not more, that Prime 4 will be showcased to some extent in this upcoming Nintendo Direct. And about that number of 4, not every Direct is going to be exactly the same. They may showcase more, they may showcase less, but I feel like that number of 4 major announcements for next year, I think that kind of keeps us within some semblance of reason. Now, another angle to consider here is that it's rumored that Metroid Prime 2 Remastered is supposed to come soon. And many of us, myself included, are interpreting this to mean that Prime 2 will be showcased during this next Nintendo Direct. We assume is this September because there's always a September Direct. And we're thinking that like Prime Remastered and also Pikmin 1 and 2 in the last couple of Directs, they were shadow dropped. In other words, they were announced and they came out the exact same day on the eShop, but a little bit later on they have physical versions coming out. That could be the case for Prime 2 Remastered. And what I find interesting about this rumor is that it's just Prime 2. It's not Prime 2 and 3. So conceivably, Nintendo could announce Prime 2, not say anything about Prime 4, and then in the next Direct, they showcase Prime 3, and maybe by that point, we know about Prime 4, or we're close to knowing about Prime 4. That is a possibility. But regardless of what actually happens, if this rumor proves true and Prime 2 comes out during this Direct, or close to it, I think that gives us a pretty good idea of when to expect Prime 4 to come out. Because at that point, it's following up Prime 1 in the same year. And that would suggest that Prime 3 is not so far off either, which ultimately would be telling us they're building up to something here. And that something would be the release for Prime 4. So even in the event that Prime 4 is not in the Direct, which by the way, I am prepared to not see. I've been burned enough as it is waiting for Prime 4. I'm prepared to not see Prime 4 in this next Direct. But if we at least see Prime 2, that gives me a lot of confidence that Prime 4 is indeed coming out by the end of next year, 2024. But as I've been arguing throughout this video, because Prime 4 seems to be the last big Switch game, and because we are entering the end of the Switch life cycle, and we need more announcements for next year, this September Nintendo Direct is bound to give us a couple more announcements about games we don't know about for next year, and that could include Prime 4. There aren't many options left. But what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you so much for listening and watching, everyone. This is Andres Restart, and I'll see you all really soon. Take care.